Well, it's a little late for us to come in and rake the mulch off of our strawberries. Now remember, we covered the strawberries to protect them from winter kill, and it's been a very mild winter, so we really didn't even need it, but of course you never know that going into it. So we wait until sometime in December when the berries have pretty much gone dormant, and then we cover them with pine star, some kind of a loose mulch where they'll still get moisture through them. If you've not done this yet, I'd encourage you to do it. Really, the time that you want to remove the mulch is when the plants start growing, and we've got quite a bit of growth coming out on them. And it's also a good time to go in and clean up any dead leaves that have resulted up through the winter and get those out of there so you don't spread any disease or insect problems. So clean them up as much as they can. It won't take any time for them to start growing really quickly, and then we'll get some flower production here before long, and then hopefully fruit. Now, I'd encourage you to use a little bit of precaution with the mulch, because again, if you get it too thick, if the plants are smothered, you'll actually lose some of them, especially if you bring the mulch off too late. And that's what's happened in the row right beside me. You can see how sparse the row is. We're down to just a few plants, so we're going to take this opportunity to actually renovate some beds, put in some new cultivars. But in this particular case, we have 2 rows of cardinals, so we'll just take these plants, transplant them into the existing row that has more plants, and it's a good time of year to do that. But in the other rows where we've lost plants or we just want to change out the cultivars, we're starting to prepare the beds. And because there's not any plants in it, or the sparse ones, and we're really starting from scratch with our heavy soils here in Stillwater, we're adding a lot of good organic matter with composted cow manure. And so we're just waiting till we get a good day that the soil is dried out a little bit, and we're just sprinkling that cow manure over the top. We've already put on 1 application, tilled it in, and putting on a second one now, because we want the beds to be raised up, probably 4 to 6 inches, so we can get a little bit better drainage. Now remember, if you're planting strawberries for the first time, really it's very wise to get the grass killed out or dig out the grass. Make sure there's not any grub worms, because that can cause problems. But add organic matter and take the time to prepare the beds. Don't get in too big of a hurry. So with us planting strawberries in the spring, a lot of times it's better to start strawberry beds in the fall and have them ready to go for the spring planting. Now we know the history of our soil test here. We're usually high in phosphorus and potassium. With the composted cow manure adding a little bit of slow-release nitrogen, we're not putting any fertilizer or lime in the beds. So what you'll see here is, with the high P and K that we already have, slow-release nitrogen, we're just getting some good drainage, raising them up. But after we get this in, we'll do a soil test to see how that might affect our pH. But make sure you know the history of your soil testing. Do a soil test if you haven't, to make sure, because if you have to put P and K on or lime, you have to do that at this stage where it's in contact with the plants. pH of strawberries are usually around 6 to 6.5, so a little bit acidic, but not too acid, or you'll get some bad production. Also notice that our beds are in full sun, and you can tolerate a little bit of shade with strawberries, but the more shade you get, actually the less fruit you'll get. You'll more plant growth, less fruit. So I'd really encourage you to try to stick to full sun as best that you can. So we're going to get these beds worked up a little bit more with some more layers of organic matter. That way, hopefully, we'll have better drainage and better production. Well, you can actually plant strawberry crowns anytime between the 1st of February to the end of March. So we're cutting it kind of late, but we've really had some wet soil, so it's taken us a while to get in. And in the meantime, our plants have been in actually about a couple of weeks, so we've pretty much hilled them in a container with a little bit of sawdust and sand, and you want to keep them moist and also keep them from freezing during that time if we got any conditions. And then when you're actually planting, make sure the roots are real moist and that you've got them wrapped up with a wet paper towel too, to keep them from drying out. Now our plants rows here that we're putting in our beds are about 3 feet wide. You can make your rows as pretty much small as 18 inches, 24 inches to 3 feet. And we try to control the width of the plants from growing out in the areas by tilling them. Now our spacing is going to be 2 feet apart, but you, again, depending on how fast you want them to fill in, you can put them as close as 1.5 feet apart up to 2.5 feet. The important thing to remember on planting the strawberries is the depth. There's a crown, and if you set them too shallow, and if this was the soil depth here, and you put them that shallow, they're going to dry out. A lot of people have a tendency to put them too deep though, past the crown, and that would also cause some problems. So about halfway is really the best way, and I can, again, halfway of that crown is most importantly. Again, we're doing 2 feet. We've got our nice soil bed worked up, and one thing I like to do if the roots are too long is to actually trim them off a little bit. Now you wouldn't want to go up past the fibrous roots, but just enough where I can fan them out easily to get them down in the soil. And again, be very careful about that planting depth. One thing I like to do is kind of pack the soil around a little bit, because as we water it, it's going to sink in a little bit, and that changes your planting depth right off the bat. Plus I leave a little bit of indentation because we're going to mulch over that to help hold the moisture in. And you'll notice that I've got an irrigation line right down the center. It's a drip tube that if we leave it on longer, it will spread across now with our organic matter for the strawberries. They're very shallow rooted, so it's real important that you make sure that you get the irrigation on the strawberries. Now with our particular cultivars, we're trying some a little bit different from our traditional ones that we've been growing. We're adding 4 new ones to our garden. Those are Early Glow, Hood, Our King, and All-Star. They're all pretty much more resistant to leaf spot, some of the leaf scorch and powdery mildew diseases, and that's one of the reasons we've purchased them, because we don't want to have to spray a lot. And also the Early Glow and the Hood ripens a little bit earlier than the Our King and All-Star, so that spreads out our harvest so we don't have to come out and pick all of them at one time, because we're going to end up with about 8 or 9 rows of strawberries. So we're spreading out our harvest time by choosing early varieties that are June bearing. And again, that's real important to remember. June bearing are probably the most recommended varieties for Oklahoma, and you can get them early, mid, or late. And that season is anywhere from early May to June, depending on what time of year you get them to harvest. You'll hear a lot about everbearing strawberries. Well, everbearing will grow in Oklahoma. It's just that they don't produce as well. Your early harvest will be moderate, and then they'll put a little bit out during the summer, and again in the fall. They're usually smaller berries and not as big and not as much production. So we really encourage people to go with June-bearing varieties. Now, a couple of rows over from me, we tried some cultivars that are referred to as day neutral, and really that's just a term used for everbearing as well. And the ones that we tried were like Tri-Star and Tribute, and you'll also hear of Merak, Yellow, and Selva as a day neutral, and there's a lot of publicity, but really they're an everbearing, and we tried them for about 5 years, and we really didn't care for the size of the fruit. The production, again, was really pretty poor for us in Oklahoma, so we've pulled ours up and we're going to expand the beds to something else. So that's why we're going with June bearing, and again, the ones that I'm putting in now are the Early Glow, and we'll put our spacing. Now notice I'm alternating our spacing too, diagonally. I'll go 1 plant to 1 over here, and then about 2 feet for us, so you have a little bit of flexibility in how you put those plants in the ground. Now once you get them planted, probably the most important thing again is the irrigation, but also mulching will help. Now you don't see a lot of people mulching strawberries, but we are going to use cottonseed hulls again, and we're going to keep it away from the crown, but the main reason is to keep the soil from splashing up on the plants as we water them in and they get established. And I don't put it on as thick as I would some of the other mulch, because you want your runners to come out and be able to peg down, and they will be able to do that in the cottonseed hulls. But that's going to help us keep a lot of the weed seeds from germinating, so we don't get a lot of weeds to start with during this early part. Now, our particular varieties, we receive those from a couple of companies through mail order, from Northwood and from Simmons Plant Farm. Because there's such a wide range of strawberries, sometimes the local garden centers don't always carry some of the cultivars. They do a good job in carrying strawberry cultivars, some of the traditional ones, but we wanted to expand our planting, so we went with a couple of mail order companies. But I would check with your garden center, see what they have available, and if you'd like more information, we have a fact sheet that's a pretty new one, 6214, that talks about the disease tolerances of a lot of the cultivars, whether they're good for fresh eating, for freezing, for jams, jellies, etc., and then how to plant them appropriately. So I would encourage you to start getting those beds ready. You've got a little bit of time. We're getting pretty close, and the later we wait, the harder it is to get them established from the heat. Now, once they put out runners, one plant will put out 30 to 50 runners in one growing season. So we'll fill in this whole bed this year, but it won't be long. Even these transplants will be putting on flower blossoms, and the first year you really need to pick them off so the plants will get established, and we won't try to get any harvest this year, and we'll wait until next year. So check around and see what's available in your area, and maybe you'll enjoy some fresh eating strawberries this year.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.